Welcome to Whiskey Gaming, and this is my late review of Wo Long Fallen Dynasty. I play on the Xbox Series X. It's also available on the Xbox One, PS4, PS5, and PC. So, Wo Long takes place in China during the Three Kingdoms era. You play as a nameless militia member. One of your primary enemies is the Yellow Turban Army, and the other is demons, because a dark Taoist is corrupting the flow of Qi in China. And throughout the game, you run into some very famous characters that you may recognize from other games and, history. But overall, I gotta say, I didn't find the story particularly compelling, although I think that's often true of this style of game. I don't know, it just never fully sucked me in. There is more of it than some other games in the Souls-like genre, but this one just didn't suck me in the way I would have liked it to. I really actually enjoy historical stuff, so it would have been nice. Now, as for the audio in the game, I love the music. I really enjoyed the music in this game. I think the music helped pull me into the world that they are creating, and it fit with what was going on when you were sneaking, when you were fighting, just all of that. As for the sound effects, I think they're done well enough, but nothing really stood out to me there. As for the voiceover work, it could be better, it could be worse, it was sufficient. And maybe I just have a much more neutral opinion towards it because I wasn't super into the story to begin with this time around, so... Now, as for the gameplay, I mentioned a minute ago, this is a Soulsborne style game. So it's a third-person action RPG with those get good, tough but fair, gameplay elements. And in my opinion, this game is very reminiscent of a certain other one because it's more about deflecting than guarding or dodging, and I will say I found that deflecting was slightly easier in this game. But that being said, it did vary greatly from enemy to enemy because they all have their own timing, and making sure you're deflecting at the right time does really matter. Getting into that rhythm so that you can deflect and counter it is really beneficial. There are other games in this genre that use it, but this game does give you the ability to stealth, and it tells you when you're in the right position to stealth and get that, extra powerful attack. Whereas other games don't, and that can be a little frustrating. But I do think that kind of goes along with this game in general, because on the difficulty level, I found this game generally easier than most other Soulsborne games. The other thing this one does that's fairly unique, not super unique, but fairly unique, is that it's very much level by level. Rather than regular stamina, you have this bar on the bottom. You can build up bonus stamina by landing good attacks, but then by doing your spirit attacks or your martial arts or your magic, you drain that. Dodging excessively will drain that. Trying to deflect attacks and failing to deflecting too frequently when you're not really being attacked will also drain that. So there still is that management of your stamina essentially. But I did think it was cool that if you were landing your combos, you were deflecting successfully, you were actually building that meter rather than draining. Like any game in this genre, you get your gear, you find what works for you, you get weapons that you feel work for you. Another element, and it's not completely unique on its own, is you get AI companions. And I will say I have played other Souls-likes where the AI companions are just too good, they're too much, they take away from the game. This one, they kind of vary wildly, and you can summon them in pretty much whenever, but every mission, it seemed like you were saddled with one. And you could send them away and bring in somebody else, or you could bring in another one and have two, and that could be super beneficial in some of the boss fights. The worst companion, I think, was the one in the beginning, because during the boss fight, he just kind of screwed me over pretty frequently. I would land a couple of attacks, I'd be trying to land a few more, and he'd come in and whack the enemy and knock him outside of my range, so I'm just swinging at air at that point. Or the boss would be charging me and I'd be getting ready to deflect, and then he would do something to stop the boss in his tracks. And so it would just disrupt my flow. And I found that very frustrating because anybody who's played these games, you get ready for it, you get into the flow of it, and then having anything disrupt that flow can really screw you. There were other missions where, the AI companions were actually really useful and they helped out a lot, but then there were other ones where they were just kind of there, and whether they had been there or not, it really wouldn't have changed anything because they weren't helping, but they also weren't hurting. So I think they really need to work on balancing that out. I liked it more than in previous games that I've seen it, but it's still far from as good as it could have been. Also, I mentioned the martial arts things. I really didn't find those particularly useful in this game because they were like these charged attacks that you rarely had time to execute. Overall, from a gameplay standpoint, I felt like this is one of the easier Soulsborns. Not necessarily easy, because none of them are particularly easy, but it is on the easier side of that scale. Let's get into the controls, and I like the controls. I think they worked very well. I really didn't have an issue. I didn't find them unresponsive. I found they did what I needed. The camera control was good. I don't have any real complaints from the controls. Then last but not least, the graphics and visuals, and I really like the design. I like the visuals. I think going to China for one of these games is a really cool idea. I think the demon designs, having these Chinese influences, is a really cool design, and I enjoyed that from an art style standpoint. I like the colorful world. I like what they built. I like the way it looks. I will say it's not graphically the best thing I've ever seen, though. I mean, it's more than good enough. It does, in fact, look pretty good. It's just there's better out there from a graphical standpoint. But I think what they bring to the table visually is really awesome. The different weapons, your armor, like I said, the creatures, just everything visually really cool, and I liked it graphically. You know, they did well, just not the best. So to get into the wrap-up of this game, it's a Soulsborne. There's a lot out there anymore, and this one is not one that I'm necessarily going to remember. It's not terrible by any stretch of the imagination, but it's also just nothing special in my opinion. Nothing it did ever fully locked me in. Nothing it did really made me fall in love with it. If Soulsborns are the only thing you play and you need a new one, sure, why not? But if you only dip your toes into there and you play one occasionally, or you're like me and you just play a shit ton of games, this one's not necessarily worth the time or effort. Okay, in the comments down below, why don't you tell me, what's a game genre that you'd like to see set in China? And as always, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please hit that like button. And if you like what I'm doing in general, share and subscribe. Have a good one. Welcome to Voodoo Whiskey Gaming, and this is my late review of Wo Long Fallen Dynasty. I played it on the fuck did I play this on? Xbox. Struggle Bus.